Hello there, and welcome to episode 2 of the Geek ETC podcast. I'm Josh.
And I'm Jon.
And today we are going to dive into a little bit more about us, and particularly we're going to be going over our top 10 video games. This will be split into 2 episodes. The first one we'll go over my top 10, and then next episode, episode 3, we will go over Jon's top 10.
You doing good?
I'm doing good.
Good.
How you been?
A little under the weather, so, apologize for that.
Yeah, it's that time of the year. We're just coming out of the holidays, and there's been a lot of, I'm sure everybody knows there's been a lot of sickness going around here and there and stuff. Both had a little bit of things here and there, but...
Oh, yeah, it's been wild. Last time you asked me a question, you asked me a couple of questions that were kind of thought-provoking, and I thought I would do the same with you.
All right.
I've seen it referenced a couple times recently. If you had a lightsaber ignited and you dropped it straight down,
perfectly vertical, how far would it go down? Because I think I've got an answer to it. What about you? I know where this reference comes from. Yeah, I happen to see that. I'm assuming this is kind of a callback to this recent episode of Rick and Morty that came out. They did a bit on that where Morty had a lightsaber and dropped it completely vertical. And I guess they set up in the episode as well that if a kyber crystal were to reach the Earth's core, that it would detonate and explode the planet.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. I mean, that seems like, sure, that in science logic, that seems like something that could happen.
Yeah, I saw a clip of it. I've not watched the episode
yet. I haven't seen it either, but I've seen the clip too. But it's an interesting theory. I mean, we've seen in the movies how, they, cut through that bulkhead door. That was episode 1, correct? Mm-hmm. When was it? Did they go to see the Senate, or was that?
That was Qui-Gon Jinn opening the bulkhead door on the battleship.
It was a battleship. That's right.
When the Trade Federation tried to poison them
with the gas. Correct.
Yeah.
It's been a minute since I've seen that first one. Need to go back and rewatch that. But yeah, you had to kind of hold it in there, and I'm sure that's some kind of Durasteel, crazy, metal alloy thing from the Star Wars universe. So it's probably pretty stout, but as we saw, with a little bit of time, it could melt and carve through that. So I would imagine something like rock or, minerals or bedrock or that kind of stuff wouldn't be able to stop a lightsaber.
Okay.
So I guess in theory, if it was perfectly vertical, that's the thing too, is if the width, or if the diameter of the blade is wider than the hilt itself to actually burn a hole wide enough for the hilt to fit through behind it.
Which it can't be because it comes out of the hilt.
That's a good point. But also, it would be hot enough that it would just still melt it enough for it to go through. Interesting thing to think about. I don't know.
I want to point out that, in a perfect world, if you did that, let's say we did it with we took the lightsaber, dropped it vertically, ignited, it would hit, melt in, and at some point, I'm assuming the rock is going to cool pretty quickly behind it. And I think it would just trap the hilt in there, in the rock, in the molten rock, and you would just have a lightsaber dangling that would eventually just...
The only way that wouldn't happen is if, it was able to burn it so quickly that it could build momentum, like when something falls, terminal velocity. Mm-hmm. If it were able to burn quick enough to fall at a terminal velocity thing so that it would fall faster than the rock could cool behind it, that would be the only way it could, I guess, continue on down through stuff.
Yes. But then here's my second conundrum. With its canon, that lightsabers are kind of heavy, like the blade themselves, like the way that they're wielded, we think about the Mandalorian and how he couldn't just swing it around. There's a good chance if you dropped it would just fall over.
True.
Because there is a super, it takes a lot of finesse. I think there's episodes of the Clone Wars, for sure in the Mandalorian when he wields the Darksaber. It's not an easy thing to just pick up and swing it around like
right.
a Jedi would, because it has some type of like gyroscopic property to it that really throws things off.
You think about it too, like it's made of light, so how could it weigh anything? And that's a great question. I don't know, but it's also not real, so maybe it does in Star Wars universe, possibly.
Well, if it's like superheated plasma, I think it would have some type of weight to it. But yeah, I mean,
that's for all know. Like, how does that move through air? Like, does it create its own air resistance, thus adding some type of weight feeling to it?
Maybe the midichlorians pull it the whole way.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, that's a debate. But on that same kind of topic, I've heard the question proposed many times on what would happen if a lightsaber met adamantium. Could it melt adamantium?
Well, see, you're more familiar with adamantium than I am. I would assume, I mean, there are canon, some like Durasteel.
There's vibroblades, which vibroblades are a type of like a metal and stuff in the Star Wars universe that can clash with lightsabers. So, Sith or various other people are able to fight against someone with a lightsaber using a vibrosteel blade.
So it seems to me then that those are adamantium, and that's canon. So
what you're saying is the mutants are in Star Wars.
I'm saying that, well, no, the Star Wars is in the mutants, really, because Star Wars came first, because it's thousands of years ago.
It was a long time ago.
In a galaxy pretty far away.
That's what I've been told, at least.
So, we want to talk about the top 10 games, and this is your episode, and so yes. Gaming is definitely something really big with us. It's one of the first things that we bonded over.
Oh, for sure. Countless evenings and hours and late nights spent running co-op through a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, co-op, couch co-op, multiplayer online, even just watching each other, taking turns. We grew up in the golden era of video games.
For sure.
And those first, I think the first time I ever met you were playing Halo 2, maybe, or something like that. I mean, one of the first time I ever went to your house, I think you were playing Halo 2. And I remember playing with you. A lot of fun. You knew all these really cool glitches and things to do that were very interesting to me that had never occurred to me, where you're going outside the map and getting skulls and doing all these things. And it was really interesting.
Right. We will get into that some, because that might show up later.
All right. Well, so tell me, do you have any like honorable mentions that didn't make it into your top 10?
I do. I will pull those up at the end once I go through my...
Oh, you can go through top 10 first.
Main ones here. And I'm going to start with the oldest one, and what I guess may have been my first, thinking back, what would have been my first favorite video game. The first thing that fell into that category. And also, disclosure on this, like, I'm not doing mine in any particular order, just because it's like trying to pick your favorite child. I love all of these games, and they're all things that, trying to whittle down to a top 10, they're all stuff that I would still, gladly pick up and play today, no matter how old they are, that they still are fun to me. And everybody has different opinions or preferences in games and stuff. And, even if it could be, technically classified as a bad, or kind of crappy game, someone may still enjoy it.
And I think that's something that was going to be a theme here in the Geek ETC podcast, is just do what you like, do what you enjoy, and have fun.
Yeah. Again, like, we're all about promoting, you can geek out about anything, and don't be ashamed of that. Embrace it. Geek culture is not as taboo or made fun of as it used to be back when we were kids and stuff. So it's like, that's the popular thing to do now. Fly free and have fun. So anyway, my first one I'm going into would be Pokemon Silver for the Game Boy. And I guess technically it was a Game Boy Color game, but I didn't have a Game Boy Color at the time. I just had the OG, like, gray Game Boy to play it on. No backlit or anything. And if you were playing at night in the car, you'd have to wait for a street light to go by to be able to see what was on the screen. And either that, or if you got... eventually I got a Game Boy Advance and could play it on there, and I had a worm light. There's a little coiled light that you could just plug into had like a USB or
guess it would have been like, or it may have been some kind of proprietary port from Nintendo, but you could have the little light that just shined on the screen. And so you'd have a glare on the screen the entire time, but you could see it play it. So I didn't care at the time, but that was one of the first games that I remember at one point seeing like a play time of over 200 hours put into it. And I would take that thing everywhere. It came out in in the US, I guess it came out around 99 or 2000. So somewhere around there. But I would take that thing everywhere. Any kind of family event or road trip or vacation or whatever we were doing, I had it with me. And I remember having probably close to 200 hours whenever my sister took it and overwrote my save file.
Oh, that's just the worst, for sure.
It was, because back then, too, you could only have one save on it. There wasn't multiple save slots or anything like that. So you had your one save, and if you accidentally saved over it or something happened, it was gone. There's no way to recover it, that I'm aware of.
A Game Boy Pocket, a pack of batteries in a road trip is super nostalgic for me. The street light hitting the things, just trying to like get just enough game time in. I think it's something that Pokemon Blue specifically was mine, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a nice, because back then I didn't get it till it was old,
right?
And it made the long road trips for the holidays so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never never actually owned Blue, Red, or Yellow, but one of my buddies had one, and I played them a little bit from time to time when we'd hang out or whatever. But whenever Gold and Silver came out, and my parents got me that one, I was instantly hooked. But because there was like this, I was really into Pokemon at the time too. Like had all the trading cards and stuff, and any other like games or stuff. Loved the TV show. But there's this new, and everybody knew the 151 Pokemon that exist. Like at the time, I could have like rattled through all of them. I was so into it. But now there's this second gen. Like what? There's more Pokemon?
And how many more did that add?
I think added another 150 or 150, somewhere around there. Essentially almost kind of doubling the amount. To coincide with that too, the show came out with their next season that Ash in the show went from the Kanto region and it was Pokemon Johto. And so that was the next region, was the Johto region, which these games took place in. And also, I guess there may be some spoilers in this episode too for, 23-year-old games and stuff. So if you're in the middle of a Silver Gold playthrough, just a heads up. It was really awesome because you're in this new region and stuff. There's all these new Pokemon, but you still had some of the old ones in there as well you could catch. So you had a lot of variety, and they added different mechanics and stuff in the game. But one of the most shocking things in the game that like completely caught me off guard as a kid was you play through this whole thing and you go through all the different towns and get all 8 badges, to be able to qualify for to compete in the Pokemon League, where you go up against the Elite Four, the strongest of the strong. And you're like, all right, I'm at the end of the game. I've, trained all my stuff up, got them to like level 40 something, 50 something, whatever. And, worked my way, put hours and hours into this and got to the Elite Four. And then you go up against them and you beat them all. And you're like, yes, I've done it. I've beat this thing. And they're like, oh, by the way, we need you to go over to this other town and talk to this other Pokemon professor. And you're like, what do you mean? What's going on? And then turns out, once you get through all the game and beat the Elite Four, you're only halfway done with the game. It completely opens up, and you have the entire Kanto region from the Blue and Yellow and Red versions in the game too. So you literally have like both games in one.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So it completely opened up, and then you start and you go down into Pallet Town where Blue and them started out, and you go through that entire map as well. That the way that it's set up is that those 2 maps are side by side with each other. And so you go through and collect all 8 badges from all the Kanto region and face all their gym leaders, and there's like all different Pokemon on that side. And so you go through basically that whole story from the first one, but it's like, a little bit later. So there's some different Team Rocket fiascos going on and this and that. And then you have the whole thing of, tracking down the new legendary Pokemon through all the legendary dogs and then the two birds, Ho-Oh and Lugia. So you got to track all them down and whatnot. But it was really awesome to, think that you were almost done with the game and then you're like not even halfway done. And I think I had like put a ton of hours into it and first playthrough before I even realized that. And then, again, that just doubles the time in it. But it was that really always kind of stuck with me as a really cool, unexpected twist in a game for that to happen, to put that many hours and then suddenly you're not even done with it.
And then pre-YouTube, where you're playing that and then you probably got an actual legitimate surprise.
Yeah, exactly. I think I had no way to, I don't even know if we had internet at the time on our computer at home or anything. So, and I don't know if I had any friends that had it, that had played it that, would talk about that or anything. So it was all just discovery on my own, legitimately just naturally stumbling upon that. Yeah, and as a kid, I remember just being completely shocked.
Yeah, the only other thing I think is, remember though, they had those, most games like that, they had those companion guides, those actual books that would help you through the whole thing. Remember when they used to sell those for different games?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if they were Bradley games or what the brand of them were, but yeah, I had a handful of those booklets for stuff on either, I think it was N64 or GameCube, maybe GameCube. I got a bunch of those books for some stuff. But yeah, those were definitely helpful, especially if you were completionist or wanted to find secret stuff or whatever, hidden things. Sometimes they'd have cheat codes in them or whatever. Yeah, those were super helpful. I do kind of miss those. But now, you can find anything you want on a YouTube video or some kind of article online. As far as walkthroughs. There's, a million walkthroughs of every game that show every little hidden secret and stuff. How to get every achievement and whatnot. Yeah, that was probably my first game that really stuck out that really latched onto and became one of my favorites. And I think I found I downloaded a ROM on my computer maybe 4 or 5 years ago or something and did another kind of playthrough of it. And it's still fun. I still enjoyed it. Even though you kind of know the story, and know what's going to happen, all this stuff, you can run through it with a completely different team of Pokemon. And so you get a completely different experience. So, you could try running all fire Pokemon or something just as a challenge to yourself to see if you can make it through.
Most important question, who was your starting Pokemon?
The main one that I think my longest playthrough that I had, and a lot of people, would say that it wasn't the right choice, but I started out with Chikorita, the grass one, which, would evolve into Bayleaf and then into Meganium. But Meganium is a pretty tanky Pokemon and has some pretty good defense and stuff, but eventually you get things like Solar Beam. That mixed with Sunny Day, which made it where you didn't have to charge Solar Beam. You could just blast it. And so if you paired some of these things up pretty well, then you could cause some pretty good damage. I never quite got into it. Seeing some of the playthroughs people do on the games now, have got completely much more complex strats and stuff, and there's a lot more stat-based stuff in the modern games and stuff as far as their nature or different special skills the Pokemon have and stuff and whatnot. So they're definitely a lot more complicated than they used to be. But as a kid, I was just I didn't really have any strats. I was just playing. I wanted to use the ones I thought looked cool or whatever. Charizard was always the coolest one, or Mewtwo or something. Another thing I just remembered about it is eventually I think one of the first secret things I did find out about it was one of my friends told me how to clone stuff in the game. So there's a special kind of technique that you could put an item on it was initially about cloning the Pokemon itself, that you could put them in the PC and then go to save your game. And if you turn to the Game Boy off at the specific right moment, while it was saving, when you turn it back on, then you would still have it in your party, but it would also still be in the computer. And so then you'd have 2 of them. And then any item that you put on them, it would also clone that item. So you could clone rare candies and master balls and catch like all the legendary Pokemon first try, and then level all your stuff up as many times as you wanted. So at one point I had an entire team full of Mewtwo's, and could just go back and like burn through the Elite Four just for the fun of it. My next top 10 is Super Smash Bros. Melee. The first one, when it came out, that was also kind of revolutionary. That the only fighting game experience I had up to that point was Mortal Kombat 4 on the N64, which that was awesome at the time. That's the first experience, like I said, experience I had with a fighting game, and it was cool or whatever. But now, with Super Smash Brothers, there's this game out that, had all these characters from all these different things. There was only, I guess, like 8 and then like 4 secret characters in the first one. So it wasn't a huge roster, but still having like Mario fighting Link, fighting Pikachu, fighting Kirby, like that was, again, mind-blowing at the time that like, they all had their different powers and moves and stuff, and there was maps for each of their, themed games and all that stuff. That one was so much fun. And I guess that, as an early thing, that would be an honorable mention for me, that first Super Smash Brothers. But when Melee came out on the GameCube, came out in 2001, that one kind of took it to the next level, because there was a much bigger roster of people, and then stuff from games that I had never even played. Like there's people from Fire Emblem and some other stuff that I had never, played any of those, but they ended up being some of my favorite characters to use in the game. But I spent many hours in that, and being able to, put on, CPUs and stuff, and you could crank up their levels and just fight against them with different things. And you had the like smash the target challenge, and then you had a challenge where you had this giant beanbag thing that you'd have to get the home run bat and try and charge it up and, knock it however many meters you could and stuff. And there was a bunch of little mini games and challenges and trophies to collect. So I spent many an hour, trying to just do all of that I could in that game.
It's always a guess game for me, and i.e. me being the guest, because I didn't grow up with any consoles. So anytime I was at somebody's house, a friend or something like that, and they had the N64, the original Super Smash Brothers, yeah, that was the fun game to play. And it stinks because like it seemed like a lot of people that actually had it didn't enjoy it until somebody was over. And so like I always got the just pure fun out of it that they were also having, because they had somebody to play against. And even having multiple, I remember several times there was like 3 or 4 people playing.
Right.
And that was like, to me back then, I never wanted to stop. I was always disappointed when I had to go home, or when the sleepover was over, or whatever it was. And it always left me wanting to do more.
Yeah. And that like definitely, that was also one of the first games I remember that out in, maybe like Mario Kart, where you could have like 4 people all playing at the same time in the same thing. And that big, like that was like big multiplayer back in the day, was having 4 people on the same TV doing stuff. And the fact that it wasn't like split screen either, that it was all just one screen, they'd zoom in and out, depending on how big the map was and stuff. But having you and like 3 of your friends all playing in the same thing and fighting against each other was awesome back in the day. And yeah, I had a lot of those same experiences where like you didn't want to stop, because you could just keep playing rounds, more rounds over and over and over again. You're like, well, I'm going to do different characters this time. And they would choose different characters. You'd have to learn all their moves and come up with combos and stuff. And then you throw in all the items you could get, and you could have the Pokeballs in that were random, and, you'd try and get legendaries or something out of them. And, depending on what you had, and you had preferable weapons, like didn't care for some of the ray guns that you'd shoot things with, but like the beam saber was awesome to get. Everybody would rush towards that. That was definitely a really fun experience back in the day, just getting in there with a few friends, everybody having their main that they would play. Mine particularly that I got the best with was Fox from Star Fox.
Same. Star Fox was my guy, and then occasionally I'd throw a Kirby in, because somebody would destroy me with Kirby. And so I would have to be like, how do they do that? And I would do that too. But yeah, for sure. I think, what was it, down and B or something like that, was you shot your gun, and I loved
down
it.
And B was the shield, the reflective shield, that if someone had a ray gun or some other projectile, you'd have the little blue sort of like hexagonal shield that would come up that could reflect stuff back at them.
That's right.
Pressing B by itself would shoot his laser pistol, and you could fire it as fast as you could push the button too. It didn't have any the opponent wouldn't experience any knockback or anything from them, so they could still charge towards you and it wouldn't stop them. But you could rack up some damage from afar if somebody wasn't paying attention or was engaged in a different battle with someone else. You could just stay off on the side and just pick them off.
You could also hold it down too and have like a longer beam, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not with his blaster. There was an item called the Super Scope, which is based off of a toy that Nintendo had, which was a shoulder-mounted thing that you could press it and do like a rapid fire thing, but if you held it down, it would charge up a big blast and then shoot like a big beam, similar to Samus's arm cannon.
Oh, okay.
Kind of thing. Yeah, that's been a long time ago. Yeah, he had that, and then you could press like up and B, and he'd like ignite into fire and like shoot like, I don't remember Fox being a Super Saiyan in any of his video games, but I guess that's a power he has to, ignite into flame and fly around, but I thought it was cool.
But could he do a barrel roll?
Probably. You definitely could in the games back in the day. And after him, I guess I would throw in some Captain Falcon, because I liked the really fast characters that you could punch really fast or, escape very quickly if someone was, had some particular weapon or something. You could just outrun them on the map and they could never catch you. So those were kind of my favorites. It was either that or occasionally I would throw in Bowser, who was just like a big, tank character that if you charged up one of their smashes and hit him like with your horns or something, then you could do a ton of damage and knock him really far away. And so it's kind of I'd kind of go one or the other things. Occasionally, throw in some other ones just for fun. But yeah, either like Fox, Pikachu, or Captain Falcon, those really fast characters were kind of my preferred flavor for Melee. But yeah, that was definitely deserving of a top 10, but many hours in that game. Next, sticking with the GameCube, if I wasn't playing Super Smash Brothers, I was probably playing Sonic Adventure 2. I'd never played Sonic Adventure 1. I think it primarily came out on Sega Dreamcast, and I never had a Dreamcast. And I didn't know anybody who had a Dreamcast. So I never really got to play it. I think I may have saw somebody playing it at some like cousin's house a long time ago, kind of thing or something, but it was just a little bit of it. But yeah, we get Sonic Adventure 2, and it was particularly Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube because it added some multiplayer modes that were like some versus modes and stuff that you could do, race against each other or do kart racing or some like treasure hunt things. But that game was really awesome because the way that the story worked is you had a hero story and a dark side story that you could run through. So you could run through the hero one, and it was this kind of connected storyline where you could play Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles on the hero side, and it was this whole, long campaign that you'd go through all these different levels and, get through to the very end, and then it would kind of come to the stopping point, and then you'd have to go through and play through the whole dark side story as Shadow, Rouge, and Dr. Eggman, or as I prefer to call him, Dr. Robotnik. As I knew him before this game, I always thought that was weird. I was like, who's Dr. Eggman? I thought he was always called Dr. Robotnik. And I haven't looked into it, but I feel like there might be some lore in that, like, they're two different people, but related. Like, one's a grandfather or something. I don't entirely know. I'd have to fact check that. Yeah, you'd run through both stories, and then once you completed both and you got to the end, then there would be a final level that would unlock where you would fight this, like, giant space lizard thing. I forget what it was called, but it was like attached itself to a space station, and again, spoilers for an old game, but throughout the whole thing, Sonic and Shadow, you would collect the Master Emeralds, or the Chaos Emeralds throughout the thing, and if you collected all the Chaos Emeralds together, then it was like literally a ripoff of Dragon Ball Z, because they would go Super Saiyan, because they would turn gold, and their hair would like stand up, and they could fly. Now, so it was an awesome like final level where you're like Super Sonic or Super Shadow and you're flying in space fighting the space lizard attached to a space station. So that was mind-blowing at the time as far as level design and stuff. And another thing to mention about this game, one of my favorite things about Sonic Adventure 2 was the music in the game. The music in kind of generally in older games particularly, like the soundtracks in games I feel like were so much better back in the day. But they had a lot of good stuff. But yeah, it was very kind of like alternative rock sort of stuff. And some of the songs in it were kind of heavy too. And I still listen to them today because they were just really well done A lot of them were done by a band called Crush 40. Did the theme songs and stuff from this game, and they killed it. They were just so awesome songs, and then like the way that they thematically, would play in that final level, and it was like the recurring theme song that you heard at the beginning of the game and stuff, and then it kicked in at the very end of it. It was just like the most cinematic experience. It was super, super fun.
Yeah, my only experience with Sonic was the Sega Dreamcast at a cousin's house, being garbage at it every time I tried. But I've seen some of the playthrough from the battle, and I think it looks like a lot of fun, especially back then, especially as a kid. That's what you had, and yeah, that platforming game,
right?
That side scroller, it could, that was the peak age of that.
And that's another thing to mention too, is like, particularly for us too, and I know you agree with this, that it was like when you think about your favorite games, oftentimes back in the day, your favorite game was the game that you had, because you didn't have an infinite selection of games, to be able to download on Game Pass or something like you do now, kind of thing. And you had the world was your oyster as far as games to choose from. Back then, you had a couple games that you had, and that's what you played for hours and hours. And you didn't get to play a bunch of different stuff. You had like one or two different things that you'd switch between, and that's what you played, and they became your favorite because that's what you had. That set aside, still thought it was an awesome game. I really liked the kind of level design, because if you were like Sonic or Shadow, for instance, they were, high speed, kind of like linear track games where you're just, running through the course, collecting coins, and, you can find hidden power-ups and stuff. And then it's a time trial thing. You're basically just trying to get to the end as quickly as possible. And they'd give you a grading scale depending on how many coins you got and finished with, and how quickly you did it, or found other secret stuff or whatever. And it kept that as a log, and then each level had 5 versions of the level. That the first one was just like a basic, then you'd have one that I think was just purely a time-based thing. You had ones that were a hard mode on the level, that there would be certain platforms that would be missing, so you'd have to like jump from enemy to enemy to try and get across certain gaps, or like certain pathways were blocked and you had to find different ways around them. So it added a different challenge to it. And then there was the whole third aspect of the game that, I'm sure some people probably ignored, but some people, it was the primary reason they played it, was the chows. It was essentially just these little kind of like creatures that you would like. It was a really strange thing to have in a game, because it was very kind of like, it seemed disconnected in it. But you would take care of, like, they were like these little babies that you would collect these animals throughout the levels, and you'd go and like feed them to these little chow baby things, and they would grow up and like get stats and stuff. And then depending on, if you, would pet them a lot, or like shake them or feed them food and take care of them, they would, essentially grow and have a light side version of them, where eventually they would get a halo on their head, and it would unlock this like heaven map that you could take them to. And it was like this like very serene and peaceful little room where you would like take care of them. And I guess it was similar to kind of like a Tamagotchi type of deal.
This was the age of Tamagotchi. Yeah.
Right.
And all my Tamagotchis got halos because they all died, and I didn't take care of them very well.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, it was kind of a 3D. Oh, there's another thing I was going to mention, is this game was, it was shocked because, I had played the old Sonic games, on the Sega Genesis, the 2D side-scrolling Sonic 2, played those a bunch as a kid. And so to have a 3D Sonic game was pretty mind-blowing at the time, and that was really cool. But yeah, with the chows, or if you just literally took them and you could like pick them up and like throw them against the wall, or like punch them or kick them or something. And if you just like literally abused this baby, it's kind of bad. But if you like abuse them, then they would like eventually turn like dark and would like basically be evil. And then another map would open up that was essentially hell. It was like super dark, and all the trees were dead, and there was like a pool that had like red water in it. And you could take them down there, and had spooky music and stuff. And so you could raise them either dark or light, or even neutral. And then they had the whole mechanic in there. We could take them to a kindergarten and teach them like school lessons and stuff. And then you could run them through different obstacle courses and races against other NPC chows, and you'd, up their stats. It was kind of like an RPG element for these little things, but it felt very disconnected from the rest of the game. But as a kid, like, I had a blast playing it and whatnot. It was literally like a whole nother game inside this inside Sonic Adventure 2.
You know, there was a 30 or 40-year-old Japanese businessman or woman, and they were in a meeting, and they just said, we should be able to hit the babies. That was, and then they agreed to that. As a corporation, they all agreed, hey, let's let them abuse the children as well, and everybody was cool with that. So, I mean, props to them for their forward thinking back then.
Yeah, if we abuse these baby chows, they will turn evil. And yeah, that's the thing that they decided to put in there. I never thought about it that way, but you're totally right.
Yeah, I always like to picture people in suits making recommendations on, like, you know, in the marketing or advertising, or like in a corporate meeting, you know, all professional and everything. And then, hey, what if we let them beat the babies? What if we let them assault them?
Right.
And then there's they go to a river of blood in a dead forest. You know,
this game's a lot darker than I remember now that you mention it. I'd never thought about it that deeply. But yeah, that was Sonic Adventure 2. Really enjoyed that one. Going from there, right around that was the time that up until that point, I essentially, like, we had a Sega Genesis, but I had only Nintendo consoles. And I mean, for a lot of people, that was kind of the primary thing, was Nintendo consoles. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64.
Nintendo was almost like Kleenex. You know, it was kind of like the...
right.
You know, parents would just say, go play your Nintendo, but maybe it was what, you know, it could have been
it could have been a Sega Genesis. But that's just what they knew of as a gaming console was, yeah, you had a Nintendo. Eventually... then got an Xbox, and right around that same time, 2001-ish, made that transition from Nintendo to getting an Xbox, which that brought in the whole aspect of first-person shooters, which I didn't have a lot of experience with. I think the only experience I really had was, I had played like GoldenEye and some stuff on the N64, or some of those, I think there was maybe a couple James Bond games or something on the GameCube that I'd played, but it wasn't a lot really there. But as soon as we got an Xbox, then Halo, you know, was a launch title, and Halo completely, you know, changed my mind on what video games could be. And I remember my first experience with Halo. I went to the mall with a buddy. You know, this was 2001, so we were kids, obviously. You know, his mom took us there, but he, you know, said there's something he really wanted to show me. And there was, I think it was either a Babbage's or an EB Games. I think it was a Babbage's back before they went out of business. It was in one of those old video game stores like GameStop now, kind of thing, before they took over. And they had the consoles with the demos in them that you go in there and play the things. Oftentimes, like in Walmart, the TV was like way up on the top, so you'd, like, you know, kill your neck staring up at the screen. But they had an Xbox there, and they had Halo on it. Those were back when they had the really huge Duke controllers, like the really big ones, and as a kid, you know, it seemed ginormous. It probably actually fit my hands pretty good now. The demo, you start out on I think it's the third level, the Silent Cartographer, where you have the classic, like, Halo music, dun, like that stuff coming in, and you're in the back of the Pelican, and you fly in on the beach, and you hop out, and like the Marines are all charging the Covenant, you know, there's like guns and grenades and stuff like going off, and then you charge in there, kill them all. And we're doing it co-op, which I hadn't had any really experience with co-op shooters like that before. So that was, you know, when he was showing me that, I couldn't, you know, believe we're both playing this game at the same time, you know, shooting these guys together. That was awesome. But then you get through that first wave, and you go around the corner, and then another Pelican flies in and drops off a Warthog. He's like, hop in. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we can both get in the vehicle at the same time? You know, thinking about that now compared to modern video games, that's no big deal. Like, you can do that in any shooter. You can both get in a tank or a helicopter or whatever. But back in 2001, that was unheard of at the time. And the fact that, like, he could hop in and I could hop on the gun on the back, and we could drive around together in this game fighting Covenant stuff was amazing.
Yeah, and, you know, for me, my first time playing Halo was the same. It was the same mission, but I didn't play it as a demo. I played it at my buddy Joey's house, and my buddy Joey, his mom was a doctor, and, you know, I never got to play a lot of games except at other people's houses because I only had a PC growing up, and, you know, not a great PC at that. And I remember going to Joey's house, Xbox, big controller, analog sticks, which were really confusing to me at the beginning. And
oh, that's right. I didn't even think about that. That like, yeah, even before that, the GameCube had the C stick, and I guess the N64 had that kind of. On that note, the N64 was the worst design controller of all time because you don't have three hands to hold on to all different things. But like there was, one joystick, and so you had minimal kind of stuff. But yeah, you had. I remember that being a thing too, is having two joysticks and having one just be your view. I remember it being so confusing on just moving at the time, on how to have one stick to strafe left and right and move forward and back, and the other one was your vision. It was very kind of confusing at the time.
It was very confusing, and for me especially. And so I remember Joey's house, same thing, silent cartographer coming in, Pelican, all of that being, wow, this is insane. And it was pretty good for us because Joey's the doctor's kid. He had a nice house. He had like a big screen TV that we were playing on, like split screen. He had a pool, which obviously to me, like, I associated pools with absolute wealth
for sure.
And yeah, man, just an absolute blast playing those missions together, co-op, and RIP all the Marines who died at my hand, because I thought it'd be funny to shoot them. They're just killing our own guys, just A, to get in firefights, and B, because they had a gun I wanted. So
yeah, that first Halo, it had like an awesome story in it. You had this awesome protagonist, Master Chief, that was the kind of, as we kind of mentioned in the first episode, this faceless hero, that anybody could kind of put themselves in his boots and stuff, and take over the personification of Master Chief. And then you had this kind of sidekick AI Cortana that was leading you through this and was the voice in your head, kind of providing guidance and stuff through the missions. But I loved the story of it and everything, and the sci-fi aspects, like all of their kind of proprietary sci-fi stuff they had in there was awesome. All the weapons were cool, the vehicles were awesome, the environments, that's another thing too, being on in that demo, when you don't really realize it at first, but then you can stop and you look out at the water and you can see in the distance the halo coming out of the horizon, and you kind of look up and you see it go all the way above you and loops back around, and it just kind of gave you this sense of scale that I hadn't seen in games before. Granted, you couldn't go there, but
well, couldn't you go out of bounds quite a ways, if I remember correctly, or no?
At least in the water, you could drive out a good ways, and you would go over your head, but it eventually hit an invisible wall, so you couldn't go too far in it. At least not in the first one that I'm aware of. There probably might have been ways to get past that, glitches and stuff, but I don't particularly remember that. Yeah, that one, and like the levels were very diverse and stuff, and then eventually, you think you've seen what there is to see, and then you encounter the flood, and you're like, oh, this just turned into a horror game. And you're down in this, you go through this swamp, and you're hearing these, signs and of like they're encountering something, that they haven't seen before, and you fight your way all the way down into the bottom of this facility, and then suddenly you're rushed by all these small little, creatures attacking and stuff and latching onto people's faces and things, and then, you fight through them, and then the big ones come out that have guns and stuff that are essentially the mutated elites from Covenant, or mutated Marines, that essentially kind of a virus, a parasite, they would latch onto them and take their bodies over, and they became zombies of sorts, but not like slow zombies. They would rush you and attack you, and like, I mean, the shotguns were always one of the best things because they would just blow them into pieces.
Yeah, I remember Joey like, oh, you gotta get the shotgun. What was it, 8 gauge Magnum?
It was 10 gauge, or it might have been 8 gauge.
I think it was like an 8 gauge Magnum.
Which was like,
because we were really into the lore of the guns and all that kind of stuff as well back then too, my buddies and I, and that was also, real quick tangent, the classic pulling out the game info and like learning about the stuff.
Yes.
I don't think Halo had that necessarily, but a lot of games did. So that was so much fun because Joey knew all the, like, it's an 8 gauge Magnum and this is that and this is whatever, and that was absolute blast, just shotgunning those hordes of flood.
Right, them just charging at you like multiple at a time, and they're coming from every direction out of the holes in the walls and stuff, and you're having to fight off the waves and this and that. It was really awesome, but not much needs to be said about it. Like, it was one of the best games ever made, and it kind of set a standard for what first-person shooters and particularly like co-op play should be. I know there's been some complaints about the new one, Halo Infinite, that they don't have couch co-op in it. They have online play, but they don't have couch co-op, which is like weird for a Halo game not to have, because that was always such a staple, is playing that couch co-op through the missions and stuff back in the day. But moving on from Halo, right after that, that's also in there, is Halo 2. That just, for all the goodness that Halo 1 was, Halo 2 just compounded on top of it and just continued that story and added, mechanics that were awesome. Now suddenly you could dual wield weapons. They had submachine guns and stuff, so you could have a submachine gun in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other, or a pistol in one and then a plasma pistol in the other, so you could kind of noob combo. Granted, they did change the pistol away from the Magnum, which a lot of people were upset about.
Me in particular, yes. I was very upset about the loss of the Magnum, but the addition of the battle rifle was pretty cool.
True. You didn't really have the assault rifle where you had the battle rifle, so a 3-shot burst, and you could pick people off at distance. It had a scope. You could zoom in. That was kind of changed the game too. So yeah, and it incorporated, now you had the Arbiter, which is this other kind of protagonist, antagonist sort of character that wasn't sure, he was kind of banned out from the Covenant, like exiled because of what he did, and essentially, eventually would come to work side by side by Master Chief. And I thought it was cool that if you played co-op, the second person was the Arbiter. That came into play with mine and yours when we would do legendary campaign runs through it. That was super helpful because Arbiter would spawn with plasma grenades, and that quickly became our technique for defeating levels on the legendary difficulty. Is I would act as a spawn point and stay back, and you would just keep spawning in with plasma grenades and rush in and stick as many people as you could.
Because I am a god with grenades in video games for some reason. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. You would just be my mobile spawn point, and spawning with the Covenant weaponry. I didn't love the plasma rifle, was always one of my least favorite guns, but plasma grenades or the later brute stick, the
spike grenades.
Oh my god. If I can stick a grenade to somebody, I'm doing it.
Yes. And it's true. It's weird that so many first-person shooters and stuff we played, that if there's any kind of grenade launch or anything mortars, anything you can lob, and has like a curved trajectory to it for some reason. I don't know why, but you just seem to pick up those trajectories and can nail stuff from anywhere.
Yeah, it's like my one little thing that gets me through things is that I was able to do that on so many different games and really do well. Even though I'm not I don't love big explosive weapons, but if I've got a grenade or something where I can launch it, I'm good at it.
Yes, and you're able to take people out with that stuff. But yeah, Halo, it came out 2004, so it was a couple of years, enough to build up some hype from Halo. It, as I'm sure anyone knows, it took over the gaming world as far as popularity, and it still is regarded as one of the best first-person shooters ever made. And it's definitely one of mine, and definitely deserves a spot on this list along with the first one. The next one on my list, around that same kind of time, came out in 2003, was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, or KOTOR, colloquially known. But yeah, KOTOR was awesome because it was one of my first, experiences really with a true RPG. I hadn't really played any up to that point, but it was not only one of the first RPGs I played, but it also had this light, dark sort of Paragon Renegade aspect to it, where depending on choices you made through the game, dialogue options, if you killed people or saved people, then you would your character would transition more to the light side or the dark side of the Force. And with that, you got extra abilities. You could use dark Force powers, more, like Force Lightning, or, the choke thing that Darth Vader would do, stuff like that, versus, some more mind reading or mind control stuff or persuasive healing things that the light side would have. Some different abilities and Force powers, which was cool. But I loved the story of that, and that, again, with some really deep lore Star Wars stuff. It added so many different planets and different things that I loved Star Wars as it was from the movies, but now there's this whole other world and different things you never heard about that took place on there. But it was awesome because you start out as you can be a smuggler or just a soldier or you start as just a basic dude on a ship that's being aborted and attacked, and eventually you find out you you might be a Force sensitive, and you end up going to Dantooine, where there's a Jedi temple, and you go through training and stuff, and they find out you're kind of usually we don't accept adults into Jedi training and stuff, but we're gonna make an exception for you because you're able to pick up these Force things very quickly, unlike anybody we've seen before, and you eventually become a Jedi, and you get to build your own lightsaber and pick the colors and go on this whole sprawling adventure on different planets and stuff.
Yeah, that's huge. Anytime that you get deep lore or you're expounding on that, especially in the Star Wars universe, it's so much fun. And then one of the things I hate about the modern movies is we deal with the whole rule of two, two Sith. There's always two Sith, no more, master and apprentice. And when we start looking at those old battles where you've got hundreds of Sith fighting hundreds of Jedis, with lightsabers, that is awesome. Harkening back to Star Wars Clone Wars Episode 2, when you see that many Jedi on screen with a lightsaber, there's something that feels really cool about it, and you get kind of that almost Lord of the Rings type of feel,
right?
Epicness to it, outside more than like just the firefights or whatever. And I really, 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 really hope the Old Republic comes into play more in the future.
Right. Yeah, there was, you would fight. Many times you'd run into Dark Jedi would be one of your opponents where there'd be like 3 Dark Jedi all with red lightsabers, and they'd have like a regular lightsaber in one hand and a short lightsaber in the other. And I'm like, there's short lightsabers? I mean, I know Yoda had one, but that's like this whole new thing. It could be in your offhand and get like an offhand, plus or minus to, a secondary attack kind of thing, like kind of a 2-weapon dual wielding sort of thing. If you were to think about D&D, 2-weapon fighting, that your offhand, you don't get to add proficiency. And that's something, if you looked into really how the game was working, it legit would worked on virtual rolls and stuff, like rolls of dice and stuff that would happen as in like D&D and stuff, that you had different modifiers in the same way that you do in D&D. You'd have like your intelligence attributes or charisma. And so it was after playing this game second time later in life after playing D&D, I kind of had a deeper understanding on the mechanics of the game. Like, oh, this is really just the same kind of mechanics and stuff as far as attributes or skills and proficiencies and things or expertise and stuff. It was all kind of built the same way, and I understood it better playing it later after playing D&D and stuff. So that was really cool. But yeah, that was one of my favorites, and they're actually remastering this game. I think it's like a remake and not just really remaster. I'm not really sure, but that's, I think, due to come out this year, 2023 at some point, and I would definitely be picking that up and doing a playthrough on that. I'm really looking forward to that. But it had really cool characters in it. You had Darth Revan and Darth Malak, which were like these new Sith Lords that we hadn't heard of and stuff. That was really cool. But yeah, the Jedi were still, widespread, and there were many of them. They weren't just like a couple of them still hanging out around like you were talking about. That there was, armies of them, and there were like armies of Sith, and Sith was a widespread entity still in the universe, which was really cool.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate bad guy, ultimate good guy, and I think that's the movies did really well with there's Sith, they're bad, but the fact that the Sith are ubiquitous, there's many of them, and they're out there, makes the threat ever more present. And I think Star Wars picked up on that a little bit, because we start seeing the Inquisitors and all these kind of like extra red lightsabers coming in, even though they were, they're not technically Sith because there's only one, right? We've got the dark side, Inquisitors who are like dark Jedi, but the fact that you could have multiple Sith, and there were the actual Sith race, correct?
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of how this wasn't here, because looking at the on the Wikipedia and stuff here, the plot of this takes place 4,000 years prior to the movies. So that's a long time, and essentially what it's saying is Darth Malak, Darth Revan's apprentice, has unleashed a Sith armada against the Republic. So yeah, the Sith were, an entire, race of people. And at one point you even land on a kind of a Sith homeworld. I think it's Korriban, maybe, where there are these temples of old Sith lords and stuff. And there's like 4 different temples of old Sith lords that you go in and you find relics from them and stuff. And so, yeah, they were definitely more of a presence back in that time, which was awesome. But yeah, that was, I've like I said, I've done a playthrough of it maybe a few years ago. It came out on like iOS, and even played it on my phone because it's a very a game. It has some pausing features. Like if you encounter an enemy, you can pause it and choose which attacks you want to do, and then let it play through and stuff. So you can kind of play it very casually and stuff. You don't have which would allow you to play it on like a tablet or a phone. But I enjoyed it on the console. But I'm looking forward to that re-release when that comes out.
I'm looking forward to your playthrough for sure.
Yeah, well, definitely that'll be some bonus content there for sure. Sticking in the realm of Star Wars and kind of around the same time, branching off from an RPG would be Star Wars Battlefront 2.
And this is actually funny because this is actually a little crossover because this one's definitely on my top 10 as well.
Yeah, it's the first Battlefront would be an honorable mention for sure. It was again that we played many hours in that one. That couch co-op sort of. You would queue up a bunch of rounds of gameplay and stuff, and it was very kind of a domination style gameplay where you'd have different points on a map where you'd have to capture and hold while you reduced tickets of the enemy team. And then Battlefront 2 particularly was awesome because it added in the fact of space battles, which was awesome because you spawn on this capital ship and you go out into the hangar and you can hop in, and they've got like a wide variety of vehicles depending on which. You could also choose whether it was the Galactic Civil War or the Clone Wars. Depending, you could pick which one you were doing for the battles and stuff. So, and depending on which one you chose, you could be the rebels versus the Empire, or like the CIS versus the clones. And they would have different weapons and different vehicles and stuff. You could go out in the hangars. You could hop in an X-wing. You could hop in a Y-wing with somebody else. So that same kind of multi-person ship capabilities there, or big transport carrier or something.
But you probably shouldn't hop in the same ship because it was hard to do. Because I think the Y-wing, you could do that. You could shoot those little auto cannons on top, right? And then there was another ship. I want to say it was with the CIS or something like that. Or no, it was the one of the TIE fighters, one of the TIE bomber.
The TIE bomber had the guided missile.
Horrible.
That one, of all the two ship things, that was probably the most useful, was that home whistle, because you could fly it in and maybe hit another, like one of the weak points on the ship or something.
Or like they had the little frigates that you could also destroy.
Yes, you could get those frigates and stuff. But yeah, that was so awesome because you could, do the space battles, and your mission was to, again, destroy, or like you have to get up to a certain point thing, and each capital ship had components to them that you could destroy either from the outside or the inside of the ship, like their shields, their life support systems, some of their auto turret computers and stuff that would change. If you went inside and destroyed their auto turret computer, then the turrets on the outside of the ship would stop working, and so therefore you wouldn't get shot down by them if one person was outside dogfighting. The other person could go in to disable the auto turrets and provide some support to the other player, which was kind of cool. Then you would just work on disabling this whole capital ship and eventually try to get a score to finish the match.
Which was, it was so much fun. That was almost like we had a plan every time. We had to go take out their shields, take out their autocannons, hop back into ships. Could we steal enemy ships? I don't think we could.
Yes.
Yeah, we could. We could steal enemy ships, couldn't you?
You could fly into the enemy hangar and then, take their TIE fighters or whatever have you.
Oh, yeah, get the TIE Interceptor and, make it sound awesome. Go out there, take out some fighters with their own stuff.
That's often what we do is turn up the score on the, completion score for the match so that we'd have So you could go in and, have the enjoyment of taking out all the ship's systems. If you looked at the default score limit, that would pretty much be enough score to finish the match if you destroyed all the system things. But we would crank that up so that we could go in, take out all the ship systems, and then still have time in the match to dogfight outside and, have that fun and try a couple different ships and then, kill a bunch of ships out in space and then eventually reach that score.
And there was always that one AI that was just better. It was like Lars Ulran or
Thrak Pharrell or something.
Yes, exactly. Who was always just wiping us out. And everybody else was fine, but there was always that one you got killed by, like Thrak Pharrell or whoever, that was just an ace. And those were fun too. There was some good dogfights. It was a lot of fun. The maps were fun. Just getting into the other ships were fun. Leveling up your pistol, that was a good way to level up your pistol, fighting inside of there. There was some pretty epic moments just trying to take out the big blue reactor,
Right.
And they would swarm you. And, it wasn't, you couldn't just, they would come in there with their Marine droids or Marines, rebels, whatever, and they would attack you. And it was really, really, really difficult to escape that.
Right. And yeah, there was kind of this leveling up aspect with the weapons that if you, got, 3 kills in a row before dying, you did that enough times, you could eventually level up your rifle to unlock like the elite rifle. That was like a 3-shot burst, quicker firing rifle as opposed to just the automatic one. And it was the same with like the pistol or, if you did it with the rocket launcher, you could get homing rockets and stuff. So there's this kind of whole nother aspect on, completing tasks to level up your weapons and get these elite versions.
And I could do that. I remember I was normally a second user on your Xbox. You were your J-Man or whatever, and I was Captain John, and I would log into my guest account or whatever, and that would keep that same progress, which was a lot of fun. The only problem with that one is you couldn't the 3-shot burst, great. The flechette shotgun, great. Homing missile, great. Pistol, great.
Oh, I know where you're going.
The beam sniper rifle was not as good as the regular sniper rifle.
I think we eventually discovered that the trick is that it could hit multiple targets at once. You could shoot like through people, but it just seemed buggy because there would be times you'd swear you'd hit somebody and it wouldn't do anything.
0 damage.
So it very well could be that we just didn't know how to use it correctly, and I never figured it out, but
I don't think so. We had enough game time in there. You guys email us and tell us what you think.
Right.
But I think for me that the beam rifle, I always try to avoid it now, because when we use the beam turret, on the other hand, when you were that engineer and you build up those turrets, when you're on Kashyyyk and you build up the turrets and there's just waves of them coming at you and you're just boop, boop, boop. That was a lot of fun. And we knew how to use those. I think the beam sniper rifle was just a little buggy. And, sometimes we were shot down by our own success because we would get so good with the sniper rifle that eventually you'd wind up with the beam rifle. As soon as you hit Y and change guns and change back, you'd wind up with the beam rifle and you'd be stuck with it.
Yeah, and then and then you're like, well, I don't want this. But yeah, like that, there was a lot of good battles. And then, you get to, you'd go on these planets that you'd see in the movies like Hoth or Kashyyyk or some of these places that like look familiar, but like they're the different locations and stuff. But yeah, you could be on Hoth and you could literally have that battle from the movies where you have the AT-ATs walking in and you'd have to hop in the little fighter jets to attach the towing cable to the legs and fly around them in circles to trip them. You could do that whole thing, which
you could also do co-op, but you shouldn't. You should let one of the other people pilot, and you should let one of the other people shoot one of the AI because they're better at it than the person is.
Very much so. It was really satisfying when we could do it together. And it felt really good, but yeah, like if you're actually trying to accomplish it and get it done quickly, it was much better to just let an AI shoot the grapple thing because they would hit it almost every time.
And the AT-ATs were just godlike. They had godlike power, and I loved the splash damage. The splash damage made it so scary, when you shoot off that main blast.
The green one.
Oh my goodness. And it would hit boom and you'd take out a whole thing. That honorable mention from the Battlefront, from the first Battlefront, you get that orbital strike, you get that huge big blast radius, and it is so fun to wipe out like 7 or 8 people with that.
Yeah, you'd see the kill feed come up and it'd be a ton of them. That was always super satisfying. Some of those things like that. Like, yeah, in the first one, the recon class could have a little drone that you could fly around, and you could hit left trigger, and it would call in an orbital strike. That would just blast down and like splash damage, kill a ton of guys.
One of the things I didn't like is sometimes some of those specialty guys didn't seem like they were as fun to play because like their weapons were a little wonky.
Had a flamethrower type of thing that wasn't great.
Yeah,
it was like a Bothan spy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was, or the disruptor gun. It was like a, it would like dissipate them or whatever. Yeah. My God, what was it? It was a disintegration gun or something like that. Yeah. Disintegration, like submachine gun. And you had to reload after every time you pulled the trigger. And you could go invisible though, but it was kind of janky.
Yeah.
Some of those guys weren't as fun to play, but then you had, some which were absolute blast. And yeah, I love that game, and this, since it's on my top 10 too, I'm gonna dig in a little bit more so that way we don't have to rehash it in episode 3 for next week. But the one of the things I really liked and was the Galactic Conquest mode.
Right.
And the real-time strategy aspect of that.
That's a good point. Yeah, you kind of you plan out, which systems you were going to conquer and try and take over, and you could apply different buffs to the matches that you do. Like, do you have back to tanks, for extra health, or do you have reinforcements so that if your tickets get too low, boom, you get another like 100, 200 guys in your tickets, as a boost. And
you would also have to unlock which troops you wanted. Because you only started out with just like the basic rifleman.
Right.
And so that was kind of cool because you got to kind of customize your army a little bit. Maybe you didn't want to have, you had to choose how you spent your points and building multiple fleets and actually getting in those fights. We had a lot of interesting ones on those bigger maps, where, we build a fleet and we would take it somewhere. And the next thing you know, we'd have to send a whole nother one right back because they took over one of our planets.
Yeah, they took one of the other ones, but it was nice with that is because you unlocked the which units you want, you wouldn't have to unlock the Bothan spy or the Empire engineer, whoever it was, the ones you didn't like, and so you wouldn't have any of them on there to take up some of your tickets and stuff. With these kind of crappy characters, you could just build your whole troop would just be the better characters,
which was fun, especially for your AI compatriots, because then you're dealing with just there's something cool about just a bunch of B1 battle droids.
Yes.
And then there's no other ones. There's a bunch of B1 battle droids, but was that the base unit for the CIS was like the B1?
I believe so.
Okay, yeah, all right. And then the B2 battle droid was one of the more special classes, right?
Right.
Okay.
I believe that's right. Might have to fact check that, but yeah, like, and then it was cool on the CIS. You had, again, those specialty units. You'd have like the droidicas, the battle droids. You could roll in there and then like transform and then activate the shield barrier around you, and you had the two basically rapid fire blaster cannons on arms that you could just demolish and mow down people with them.
Yeah, and good luck dealing with that. Good luck dealing with that, especially when the AI used it and they used it to like their maximum capability. They were a pain in the butt to deal with.
Two of those things would roll up on you, and like unless you had somebody on rockets or something to apply that damage and take down their shields quickly. When you got rid of the shields, they'd die pretty fast, but those shields were beefy.
The shields were beefy, and it seemed like they would always roll them into a choke point. And that was one of the worst things, is when they roll them into a choke point and Thrak Pharrell or BD 123 just wipes you over and over and over again.
Yes. Yeah, it could get frustrating for sure. But yeah, that was one of those games too that you could play the same, there was a good selection of maps, but it was so different every time you played it that it never really got old. Even to this day, like we still went back and played it, not that long ago kind of thing. And it's one of those games that is kind of timeless because every time you play it, it's a different experience on the maps and stuff. We'll probably do some gameplay of that in the future at some point because it's still fun.
Oh yeah, we have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I still enjoy playing that game. I'll have to check that out again. Continuing with some shooters and stuff, this one definitely holds a special place, I know, on both of our hearts. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas 2. This game, back in the day, in the time of a Blockbuster and renting video games, that was what you did is, in the weekends, if you were good that week and stuff, or you happen to save up, enough from something, you could go and, rent a game for the weekend for a few days. And, you'd try and play as much as you could over the weekend before you'd have to turn it back in, to avoid late fees and whatnot. But this game, I think we ended up, we enjoyed playing it so much because it had that of essentially a tactical, shooter, where you would go through and clear rooms and stuff. You had the missions, the campaign you could play through, go up, but then you just had the, I guess, kind of more arcade missions you could do where you essentially fought against waves of enemies, sort of deal, where there was like a number, there's 30 or 50 NPCs, bots.
Terrorist hunt, right? Was that what it was called?
Yeah, oh, right. Yeah, terrorist hunt. In the thing where you'd have to go and your mission was literally just to eliminate all of them. And you'd be on, some varying map, either, a casino or some kind of like villa or some other map like that. And your mission was just to kill them all. But this game, one of the things that I liked about it is it added this kind of, I think we kind of talked about it a little bit in the first episode too, that added this character customization aspect to it, which was one of my first experiences in a shooter particularly that had character customization. And it was pretty thorough. Like there was, as you leveled up and went through the ranks and stuff, you'd unlock different camos for your gear and stuff. You'd unlock different weapons, or different, helmets or different outfits and stuff that you could have. And you could customize them all as far as what kind of camos they are, colors. And we spent a lot of time doing that and having fun with that. But the terrorist hunt mode, I think we particularly played the most, because again, just these, even if you played it, time and time again, oftentimes it would be different. Some of them would be different. There are a couple levels though that after playing them enough, you essentially would learn where the spawns would happen and how to trigger the spawns. And so, if you went into this one room and sat next to the door, that all the enemies in the level would essentially spawn right outside that one door. But after they would spawn in, you could cue them all to spawn and then attach a C4 to the door and then just blow the door with a C4, and it would kill 15 of them.
And you'd have those, moments where these ragdoll people would just go flying through, or like this big, huge pile of them. And one of the cool things too is, we could go loud, we could go quiet. It was fun to try different ways in different difficulty modes. And they were challenging, but the other fun thing was some of the destructibility, because we could blow doors, right?
You could blow up doors with C4 and stuff, and you could shoot through them as well.
Shooting through the doors was a lot of fun. Especially you'd see that muzzle clip or something like that, for the pixels clip, and you knew there was a bunch of people, and then you'd start just dinging that door, hearing that thud, 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 thud.
Yes.
You'd hear the door noise, hear the body noise. That was really satisfying as a gamer.
What was also awesome in it that I liked about those early Rainbow Six games is, we'd be in the door pressed up against it so they couldn't open it, and you'd hear the bunch of them outside, and then one of us, you could literally shoot where the hinges would be at on the door, and you shoot one of them, and then when you're ready, you'd blast the other one, the door would fall, and then you just open up with a machine gun.
That's right. I remember that. We had a lot of fun doing that.
I think you could also use a snake cam to look under the door, and you could see how many there were.
You could. and you'd see just feet. Like, just see boots everywhere.
Yes. But that was, really awesome. Yeah, you just, light up the door itself, and you'd get all the hit markers, and you'd, get the kill feed and stuff of all of them falling down. And then if you shot the door too much, though, then it would just destroy itself. So you'd kind of figure out that nice mix of enough to wipe out some of them, but not enough to destroy this door, so you'd still have cover.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can loop around, outside, and flank them around another side and take them out.
And, there's just something really cool about two bros who are rappelling upside down with pistols, suppressed pistols.
Oh, right.
And, doing, there was that one convention center or whatever, I remember, and there was definitely several times in there where both of you could rappel upside down aim at a dude, take him out quietly, very Splinter Cell like. It was very satisfying, and man, just a lot of fun. And maybe you were the guy that goofed. Maybe you were the guy that accidentally shot loud. You forgot to put your suppressor on, and that turned into a whole thing. It was always something different every single time.
Yeah, many times it would start out as like a stealth operation. You'd go in with suppressed weapons and stuff, pick out as many as you could, because we kind of know where they would spawn. But then, if like you missed a shot or something, or one of them heard you, and then you're like, all right, it's on. And now they're all coming for you. And so we would hold up in some position, in kind of a corridor, make a kill box sort of thing, like a fatal funnel sort of deal, and then just wait for the waves to come in and just fight them off.
And I think that a lot of people realized how fun that was. That's the reason why they made like a lot of like defense things. Like, there was a lot of games that came out with like defense modes against hordes of whatever, like Gears of War.
Gears of War did that first with the horde mode.
Yeah, and that was, sometimes we would do that intentionally. I remember we would just fire shots or shoot one person and then just, how many people can we kill coming up the ladder?
Yeah, we would know that there would be a very defensible, a one way in, one way out spot. And we knew it was very defensible, and we knew, if we shot this one dude in this one place on the map, it would trigger everybody. And so we would sneak our way as quietly as possible, maybe picking off a couple guys just to get into this location, and then we'd unsuppress and shoot a couple guys or throw a grenade and just wait for them all to come. And there'd be like 50 guys that would all come up, and we'd just try to hold them off from this one position.
Yeah, and we did it over and over again, and, I have to think that other people found that fun as well, rather than just moving throughout the whole thing. There's just something fun about, like, a last stand.
Yes. Yeah, just trying to survive against waves and waves of enemies coming in over and over again. But that was definitely the fun part of that, and we did that over and over again, the different maps, constantly, just surviving. But what I was talking about at the beginning is we liked this game so much, we initially rented it from Blockbuster. We probably rented this game like 7 or 8 times.
At least.
Enough to cover the cost on just purchasing it, I'm sure.
I think that was like our original thought. We were like, we've bought this game just already through renting it.
Yeah, surely. And like it probably would have been more beneficial to just rented it and then never took it back and they just charged us for it. But eventually, I think I ended up buying it used at GameStop.
Yes, you did.
Or something. And then it was on from then. We just had it and we could just play as much as we want. But yeah, we probably rented that thing like 7 or 8 times. We'd like go in and get it the next week after we take it. I think there may have been one time that we turned it back in and then immediately rented it again.
Oh, for sure we did. Yeah, for sure.
Like the same day while we're there.
Yeah, so much fun. And another thing is sometimes blind fire is a lot of fun. I remember getting on on a corner and you would go into third person mode or whatever. Yes. And there was just something fun sometimes about those snapshots around a corner. You take your pistol and you just whip it and somebody would die without even you aiming. Yeah. That's super satisfying as a gamer too.
That, or like with the SPAS 12, you'd have the shotgun that you just somehow one-handed lean that thing around the corner of the thing, and because it was a shotgun and they were right around the corner, you just lean around and just pop them.
Well, you got bionic wrists obviously from Rainbow Six.
That's true. You are a special operator, so you have godly strength. But yeah, that one had a lot of good of those last stand moments in it, for sure. So that definitely earned its place. The number of times we were in that earned a place on my list. Going from there, a handful of years later, up to 2011, was, I guess this would be kind of my next experience with, and maybe really kind of, I guess Knights of the Old Republic was a true RPG, but a kind of a bigger game, a more serious deal with RPGs. This was my first introduction to the Elder Scrolls series with Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I hadn't played any of the Elder Scrolls before. I heard a lot of people talk about it in high school, Morrowind and Oblivion and stuff, but I never had the means to check them out at the time. But I remember that Skyrim might have been the last game that I went to a midnight launch for. I remember going to GameStop and I remember I had the soundtrack downloaded of that like opening main song. And I had it, I remember sitting in my car outside of GameStop at like 11:30 or something, just playing that song over on repeat. Because I remember seeing the trailer and like, this is something else. I hadn't played a game like this. This looks awesome. There's dragons, and you're like, can like use dragon powers and shouts and stuff, and this whole sprawling landscape of environments. And
it, we made fun of it in our first episode, how many times it's been released, but when you go back and you actually remember the original release, there was a palpable like anticipation and like for it, because they did a really good launch. I also hadn't played the Elder Scrolls games, with the exception of just playing it at my buddy's house. I remember playing one time when I was a kid, when I was younger. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember having a bow and pulling it back and shooting a spider or something like that with it. And I was like, man, this is a cool game. Like, I wish I had a console so I could play this game.
Right.
But I couldn't remember what the game was. And as soon as I got into actually playing Skyrim, I was like, oh, this was probably Morrowind or something like that, back in the day, or one of those games.
Right. Yeah, it added like having that first person use for bows and sword fighting and all that stuff. I had never played any game that had, like, I played first person shooters a ton, but like this first person experience in a medieval fantasy environment and stuff was completely new to me and very, very refreshing. It was a very nice change of pace to, from the fast paced stuff of run and gun and all the stuff that now I'm riding on a horse through this, snowy landscape, and who knows what you're going to come across. And it like you mentioned in the first episode, there's, I don't know how many times I've played through it, but every single time there was some mission or some little cave or dungeon that I hadn't ever found before, or some NPC that had some side quest that I never ran into. There's almost an infinite number of things to do in that game. I think there technically is. You can like talk to a barkeep and get, some bounty mission that knows just constantly recycle and stuff. But yeah, having like, you can have magic and having the RPG elements too, that you can kind of design the character you want to play. Do you want to be, the stealthy archer that, 90% of people default go to, even if they try to do other stuff? Or you could be the kind of barbarian or dual wield swords, or you can be the mage and have, a staff and use, fire magic, or, necromancy stuff and summon, zombies or skeletons to fight alongside you, kind of thing. Like, there's such a diverse play style, and you could even mix and match. You could be a battle mage. You could use magic, but still, stealthy snipe people with bows if you wanted to. And just the diversity of the game really, really captured me and really captured my imagination, and the fun, that I could have in there in this fantasy setting.
And it's one of my honorable mentions as well, and it's wild to think about all the customization you could do. I remember playing specifically, I had my main character and leveled him up to 81 or whatever what the original top out was, and for me there was something about I was just going through and doing way too, like, I didn't put enough into it. I just kept choosing these different storylines. So then when I started creating other characters, I really did put more of like, well, this guy is going to have a steel sword and a longbow. That's going to be his shtick. And, or I remember seeing that there was a orc in like one of the cutscenes, and he had 2 axes and he had this cool outfit on with like these skulls and stuff. I remember that was a Forsworn outfit. So I remember creating an orc specifically with he's going to be like a dual wielding axe guy.
Yep.
Finding my Forsworn thing just to make him look like a jacked, like bloody savage.
Right.
That was in one of the cutscenes, one of like the little, spin him around download screens. And I loved that, playing all those different things. And then there's some of the exploits. I remember, my first character I leveled up with, there's that one book that you could get.
Yes.
I forgot what it's called.
Some kind of name. But yeah, there was like a glitch that you could put it on like a bookshelf and then like read it while it's still on the bookshelf, And I forget the technique to it, but there's something you could do to keep reading the book over and over and over again. And every time you read it, you level up a few times.
Yes, and you would level up like a skill set, like all of these different types of skills. And that's what I did for my first one. I remember, I think I did it for a few of them just to get really powerful. And that was so much fun. And yeah, I liked having different ones. You know, I like creating my own storylines inside of games in my own head. You know, that's something that I enjoy doing. So I would do that, you know, like I had like a dark elf who I'd have like the kind of like half shaved like female dark elf, and I make her kind of like a dark assassin, or, you know, everybody likes a Khajiit, or, you know, I'd play an Argonian, you know, who was like a magic wielder or whatever. But I loved all those things. I love the mod community, what they've done for it as well, because that's one of the biggest things. Once developers open up mod tools, it's great, you know, because adding all those, there's some of those mods that add so many different spells and so many different spell types, and you know, that is like a whole nother thing. I wished it was a little bit simpler to like pop in and out of spells, see which spells you want without having to like pause time, go through like a whole list of them, you know, because once you learn so many, it's hard to do. But man, there were some really crazy ones, like some more powerful paralysis ones that would work on anything.
Yeah, and there's like mass paralysis stuff that you could like paralyze like a whole group of bad guys at the same time or something,
or paralyze if you're speaking properly.
Listen,
but the paralyze in like, I remember there was one in the there was one spell that replicated. There was a sword in the, what was the one where you went to the dark elf place? What was the down DLC? The Dragonborn one where we fought the other Dragonborn.
Yes.
And there was a sword you could get in that, and if you did a power move or whatever, it's something like this slashing flame towards enemies. And there, I remember there was like spells like that were added into it where you had that exact same thing.
Right. Yeah, it definitely had a lot of diversity, and that's one of those games too, where the mods where, you know, you'd play through it, you know, regularly a few times, but then you'd load up a save and you'd have the cheat room where you can just go in and you're like, all right, now I've played it for what the game is, but now I'm going to, you know, again, be level 100 or whatever, have like all the spells unlocked, you know, have whatever weapons I want, you know, all this, you know, all the houses and stuff. And so you just kind of have fun with it. You kind of make it a playground of sorts.
And with the alternate start, you know, mod, especially, because then, you know, starting somewhere, maybe starting with a house, and then you can like kind of, you know, RPG, like I'm a citizen of Whiterun. Right. I'm a citizen of, you know, wherever. Yeah. And I live here and this is my house, and, you know, I'm going to go to the anvil and immediately make my leather armor or whatever I want, so I get that feeling of this is my character without having to go through it.
Right.
And then I start my playthrough.
Right. I've done a lot of that on a lot of playthroughs too that kind of get into the more RP aspects of it. And there's a few mods, survival mods that I download where you can make camping gear, and depending on where you're at, the weather actually affects you. You know, if you're in the, you know, the more northern, colder climates, you actually have to have fur clothing on, and it gives different buffs so that you don't die of hypothermia. Or like if you get too wet, you have to get by a fire and dry off, and you have to make food and stuff. And so there's a whole kind of adds a survival element to it. So it kind of becomes a whole completely different game where you're just like surviving in this, you happen to be in the Skyrim world in the wilderness, but you kind of just got a survival sort of game in there too, which was really cool.
So you're saying if I go to the throat of the world and take off all my clothes, I should have to suffer hypothermia? I don't think that's really realistic.
It's pretty cold up there. Also, that in Parthenax will probably look at you kind of funny too.
I mean, you got to kill Parthenax, right?
You don't have to. You can. That's up to you.
I want that blades armor. I want all the blades swords I can get. No, yeah, that is one of those, man, yeah, what are you going to do? You're going to kill Parthenax?
Choices.
A lot of choices. There's a lot of choices. There's a lot of ways to play it. And there's, you know, I really like the Dawn Guard DLC. I thought that was a lot of fun. The you know, from what I understand, they've made the especially in the newest released one, they've made the werewolf and vampire playing styles like a little bit more fun. But those were a lot of fun just because they added some extra armors, they added crossbows.
Right.
You know, I loved the Castle Dawnguard. I thought it was pretty neat. It was a pretty good storyline. You know, that one mission, and you get God, I forgot what her name is, but the daughter of the vampire lord, and it's fun having her as a follower.
Right. Yeah. That as far as DLC goes, that was one of the better DLCs I've played in a game. Was that Dawnguard stuff? Because yeah, it added a whole nother element. Like you encountered a couple of vampires in the base game and stuff, but they were very basic vampires. But this added much more complexity to the vampires and stuff. And you know, eventually, you know, you could, if you wanted to sign up for it, you could become one. And not only, you know, regular one, you would be able to transform into the vampire lord form, where you legit were like scary looking. You had wings, you could fly. Well, I guess hover. Technically, you couldn't really fly around, but you became this like super scary thing. But it was kind of cool that like if you had that, then even in your human form, and you're in a town like Riften, you know, the patrons or like the NPCs walking around, they'd be like, "You look kind of sickly. Like, are you all right? Did you contract ataxia or something?" All this stuff, and you're like thinking to yourself, "No, I'm secretly a blood-sucking vampire," but just to see how, you know, depending on, again, the choices you'd make would affect different parts of the games and stuff.
And you could go to the whole farmer quest line in that. You got that really cool white armor and all that, the snow elf armor or whatever, but that was, you know, there was a lot to it. The cool bows, the exploding, like, radiant damage bows or arrows and stuff. Man, what a blast. What a fun time to shoot those things. And like, you know, it was a good storyline, and it was one of those things. I agree. It probably is one of the best DLCs I've ever played outside some of the Mass Effect ones.
Yeah, but I loved the thing that they do with those Elder Scrolls games. Similarly in the Fallout games, is like you have kind of an opening sort of level sequence, you know, at maybe 30 minutes to an hour's worth of stuff that's kind of scripted and kind of linear that you do. But then once you get through that, you either come out of a cave or a vault or something, and then it's just like, all right, here's the world. You can go and do what you want. And you have completely free reign that you can literally go anywhere, start anything that quest you happen to come upon. You don't have to follow the main storyline at all. You can literally, you know, spend like 80 hours in this game and never fight a dragon, and like never even start the main storyline at all.
Which is what I would normally do. I would go to Whiterun, never talk to the Jarl, do my things, go do my fun stuff. You know, I think you get through the majority of a lot of the different, like, I think at some point in the Assassin's Guild, you probably had to start that.
The Dark Brotherhood.
The Dark Brotherhood one, you had to start the main storyline for sure. For the Civil War at some point you have to. But yeah, you could do so much and have so much fun. And yeah, that was what I enjoyed doing. And I really was happy when the alternate start mod came around, because then it essentially does the same thing,
right,
without having to go through Helgen first.
You can just skip that whole first part and get right into the action, you know, get out in the world and start exploring and build the character you want to build. That definitely is a game to be remembered. I'm really looking forward to Elder Scrolls 6 when that comes out, you know, in 30 years or whenever. They announced it, you know, they showed the little teaser a handful of years ago, but there hasn't really been any other word on any timelines or whatever. Bethesda, the company who made it, they do have their new RPG, a new IP coming out, Starfield, which I am interested in. There's a couple issues I might have with it from what I've heard of to begin with, but Bethesda, any game they've made has kind of been a Rockstar hit, so I'm looking forward to that, and that'll be fun, but I'm really looking forward to whatever Elder Scrolls 6 will be. And that's whenever we find out more information about that, I'll definitely be like plugged in and glued in on that, and we'll be picking that up day one. Like, I don't even know anything about it, and I know I'm going to play it, kind of thing.
Which, I mean, you know, that's the thing. Hopefully it will come out at some point soon, because there is people like our age group, you know, in our early 30s to mid 30s, where we're going to, like, we don't want to. There's some people that are starting to age out of the gaming things, and I think that's something that can bring a lot of people back into it, because when Elder Scrolls Skyrim released, like I said earlier, there was something about it that felt special, the way that they released it. all the special editions they had, all the commercials they had, which were pretty epic. And if we get something similar to that for 6, I mean, I think you'll see a resurgence of some people that have gone away from it as they've gotten older.
Agreed. Yeah, but that one will always hold a special place in my heart for sure. And there'll probably be, again, as many times as I played, I'll probably end up playing it again at some point. Probably whenever like Elder Scrolls 6 more info comes out, I'll be watching that and it'll get me jonesing for some like fantasy RPG stuff. I'm like, well, I guess I gotta play Skyrim again. So I'm sure that'll happen at some point. Anyway, moving on to my last top 10 game in my list would be sticking with the same publisher, Bethesda, a different developer, but same publisher, would be Fallout New Vegas.
Good choice.
Yes. Fallout games, it's a similar kind of thing as Skyrim. It's an open world RPG, but as opposed to a medieval fantasy sort of setting, it takes place in a somewhat kind of future or modern post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear detonation world, a wasteland where society, the nuclear war was very prevalent and imminent in the storyline, and so society as a whole built fallout shelters, these big vaults all over the world and stuff that if nuclear war were to break out, then everyone would retreat and live in these vaults for hundreds of years till the nuclear fallout in the nuclear winter and all this stuff, the radiation eventually died off enough that as a civilization, humanity could emerge and rebuild the world. And so most of the games start out with you wake up, you're in some sort of vault of some kind, and similar to kind of Skyrim, you'll have like an hour or so of gameplay, kind of learning the controls, getting your bearings, this and that. But then you eventually leave the vault and you step out into this wasteland of mutated animals and creatures and a bunch of raiders and bandits who have came out earlier, who have like built little encampments and civilizations all over the place, and you just have this wasteland to explore and experience and see what kind of mysteries lie out there in the distance. But New Vegas particularly was awesome due to it, it taking place in Nevada, and some of the surrounding towns and stuff, and you eventually get to Vegas itself, and there's a lot of stuff on the strip, but the storyline of it I really, really enjoyed, and all the different, and the similar to Skyrim, like there's just so many side missions and side stories to be heard, and so many different factions throughout the wasteland that each had their own individual stories and progression, and memorable characters from each of them. Just the development of the game and the story and the lore behind a lot of the stuff was just excellently done, in my opinion. And it's again one of those things that as many times as I played it, like I would find missions or people that I had never seen or talked to, or missions that I hadn't done before. And so it always had something new and refreshing to be done in it.
Yeah, for sure. And it was one of my first, I played Fallout 3 a little bit, but New Vegas was like one of my first ones I played all the way through. Same. More than once. And yeah, I like starting out in that little town. I like, or you wake up, you've been murdered, spoiler alert, and you've been murdered or thought that you were killed. Mm-hmm. And, you're the courier and you're out there to, figure out what happened to you. And the NCR, a lot of fun. The Legion, a lot of fun. The Super Mutants were really interesting to me. The bumper swords, all those things. Right. I remember early on, I'd always want to find the guy near the billboard, the cowboy, kill him and take that revolver. So, there was a revolver that played the music every time you pulled it out or holstered it. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. I also found the idea of ammunition types interesting, because it was one of the first games I had played where hollow point ammunition, incendiary ammunition, I can load those separately. I can do that kind of thing, and I can add some more versatility to these guns.
Right, you had options as far as like what you were going to use, different modifications to weapons or different ammo types and types of things. It added that the customization. You can kind of change your play style to fit exactly how you wanted to play. If you wanted to be more stealthy or have stuff that dismembered the bad guys or something, we could use explosives or whatever, just melee weapons if you wanted to. But yeah, it was again, another one of my first kind of true big RPG experiences that I had, that alongside with Skyrim.
Yeah, so much fun, so many interesting weapons, so many interesting places, really crazy decisions. I mean, couldn't you destroy that whole town at one point? I think you could set off a nuclear bomb and
that
blow
was
up.
in 3.
Oh, was that 3? Okay, I remember that very well.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah, no, that was in 3. I forget the name of the town, but yeah, there was a nuclear bomb in the middle of the town that hadn't detonated, and you could either choose to disarm it or arm it and then run away, and the whole place would blow up. And thus the same thing. That's another one of those choices that, depending on what you did, there may have been other missions or things to be done there, but because you detonated the bomb, that whole town's just gone now.
Yeah, you get that dinging where it's just like, this mission fail, because you blew up the whole place, or you killed that person. That was one of the other things, is you could kill somebody who might be important a little bit down the road. I remember killing people who annoyed me, and it'd be like, give me a tiered list of missions that I failed that now that I've killed that guy, those are just completely off the table.
And I like that freedom that it gives you, that, like, you're able to completely bypass it and just get rid of missions just by taking somebody out that, normally it could have been, long spanning, a couple hour, missions and stuff, but nope, they're gone now. You'd either have to reload a save or, do a different playthrough with a different style later, and you encounter them again. But you had that freedom and that ability to really do whatever you wanted to do. Was awesome.
And a consequence.
Yes, and the consequences that came along with that, and similar to, Skyrim or some of these other RPG games, things that you did would have lasting and effects later down the road. I've just always really enjoyed that one. I've played through it again, like some of those other ones. I've played through it multiple times. That one I think was a little too old to really have, or at least on consoles, to have any of that kind of modding community in it. They didn't really have that ability with those older games on older consoles for mods, but I'm sure, I know there's a ton of them on PC. Haven't played through it on PC. But yeah, that's one of those, again, I wouldn't care a bit to play through it again someday, just for that kind of, at this point, that has that nostalgia factor to it. That, again, waking up with the platinum chip, and hearing the music and stuff, war never changes. All that sort of stuff. I can hear the guy's voice in my head saying that it brings back good memories.
Excellent game. Excellent one.
Very, very good. But that pretty much wraps up my top 10 list. And, at least for now, who knows what games will come out that might take a spot on that list. I'm hopeful that something good enough comes out to do that. I'm always looking forward to new things. And we'll see what comes from that. I will go over hit a couple honorable mentions of things. Like, it was a pretty big list. I had to really whittle it down to get to these select few, but I'll just run through a couple honorable mentions. Just the entire Mass Effect series. I know that's something, you may dive into next episode, but those games, again, the lore went deep. The sci-fi was awesome. The gameplay was a little janky in certain instances, but the rest of the game was so good, you completely could look past the gameplay on some of those things. But yeah, the characters in that, the choices and stuff you can make in it, it was an amazing series of games. The Splinter Cell games, another series, like that was really my first thing that got me into stealth, true stealth games. That was one of the last really purely stealth games I had played. Dishonored had some similar sort of things, but Splinter Cell really kind of set the pace for what a stealth game could be. And I'll still, I can hear Michael Ironside's voice as Sam Fisher in my head. I've read a couple of the Splinter Cell books, and those are really entertaining because I could hear all the characters' voices in my head as I was reading it, because it's such a unique voice. But those, being able to just sneak up behind somebody and grab them and interrogate them, and then like snap their neck and stuff and then climbing on pipes and reach down and, strangle somebody or whatever. Like, you felt like a modern ninja of sorts, which was amazing. After that, Battlefield 3, that was another game we put tons of hours into. That was the first one. It was kind of a refresh in the Battlefield series. Like, they had a bunch of the older World War II things or, Battlefield 1942 and stuff. And this took a modern, twist to it, which really was kind of refreshing. And the gameplay of it was, at the time too, it looked amazing. The graphics were awesome. But that was a really good one. Fable. That was another early experience with kind of RPG, good versus evil elements. And choices you made would affect gameplay later down the road. That was super fun. I got to throw Minecraft in there. When that first came out and stuff, like that was also there hadn't been a game like that procedurally generated world that was kind of endless and you could build anything you wanted to. And it was just an open world for you to completely explore and make your own. Put countless hours into that, just, building stuff and kind of having fun in that freedom that was there. But yeah, that kind of wraps up my top 10. But yeah, we'd like to hear from you on what are some of your favorite games, things that, your favorite either through nostalgia that you played as a kid or just had awesome gameplay. And I'd like to hear, what do you think about some of the ones we mentioned? Do you agree with them? Are they some of your favorites? Do you disagree? Let us know.
Send us an email to geeketcpodcast@gmail.com. And you guys can also follow us at our different social media handles, Geek ETC Podcast on Twitter and at Geek ETC Podcast on Instagram.
Yeah, tweet us. Let us know what your favorites are. But I think that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. Good conversations. We'll be looking forward to hearing from you next week and figure out what your top 10 favorite games are.
And the variety, a little bit different because we came up a little bit different too, so thanks for sharing yours. It's been a fun time and, keep repping what you guys enjoy.
Yeah, keep on geeking out.